Today I'm going to show you how John and Jane went from worrying they'd never be able to retire to living comfortably on $10,000 per month throughout their retirement. Let's jump in and see how they were able to make that happen. Like many of you, as John and Jane began getting older, they had this increasing sense of anxiety of, are we going to be okay? Are we going to be able to retire and not run out of money? Now they had this anxiety in large part due to the fact that they saw their parents go through the same thing. As their parents were getting older, they hadn't saved enough, they hadn't prepared enough, and during their latter years, before they ultimately passed, they relied pretty heavily on John and Jane to help support their income needs. John and Jane were determined not to let this happen, but they were faced with this dilemma. They felt like they had to choose either between enjoying their retirement and spending what they wanted, or really cutting back on spending to ensure they had enough to last the rest of their lives, but not really being too excited about what that spending looked like. Let's take a look at their financial plan to show you what they are able to do to make everything happen. So here's a snapshot of John and Jane's plan. As you can see, they've done a good job of saving, of planning. Now, sometimes I'll get comments of people saying, how on earth could someone be anxious or scared about their retirement planning with that much money in their portfolio? Well, I'll tell you that whether you have $1 million, $3 million, $5 million, $10 million, that sense of, am I going to be okay, for most people, never really goes away, at least until they have a comprehensive plan that helps show them what that money can do for them. So don't pay so much attention to the numbers as much as the framework that we're going to walk through, because the principles here really apply whether you have $5 million in your account, $500,000 in your account, or any amount that you have, and you're asking yourself the question, how much can I spend in retirement without worrying that I'm going to be okay for the rest of my life? So here's John and Jane. John has his 401k with about $1 million in it. Jane has $700,000 in her 401k. They have a joint investment account with $320,000, and then they have their home with a little bit of a mortgage still left on it. Now for this projection, based upon the way they're invested, we're assuming about a 7.2% growth rate on their investments between now and the time that they retire, and about a 6.5% per year growth rate on their investments once they're actually retired. I want to be very clear, that's not a guarantee that they're going to get that. That's simply what we're starting with as we're going through the assumptions underlying their plan. Let's take a look at the goals that John and Jane have and just real quick highlighting their age. John is 62, Jane is 60. The goals that they have are to retire at 67 and 65. So they want to know, how do we retire together? Start enjoying and traveling and having that adventure that we want to have in retirement at the same time. When they did retire, their goal was to spend $10,000 per month throughout retirement. As I mentioned at the beginning, that's their goal, but they have this anxiety of, that's what a really great life would look like. We'd be able to do a lot of really cool things like that. We also don't want to end up like our parents. We don't want to be dependent upon our children to pay our bills at the end of our lives because we overspent early on in retirement, we ran out of money, and now we're stuck in a very difficult position. So this is their goal, but also that anxiety was behind the goal, or that nervousness was behind this goal, and we wanted to see what we could do to alleviate that. Well, the next thing that we did was we took a look at their current income and their future income. You can see John's salary here and Jane's salary here, but more importantly, we wanted to understand, what is their income going to look like in retirement? Well, John wanted to delay his Social Security until age 70. If he did so, his benefit would be about $3,900 per month. Keep in mind, he's retiring at 67, so 3 years of no income and then a high benefit at 70. Jane was going to collect her Social Security at age 67. That would come out to about $3,100 per month. So those are their income sources today and in the future, and along the way, they're both saving 10% to their 401ks. So you can see John's company's matching 3%. He's putting 10% of his contributions in, or of his salary in, he gets a 3% match. Jane is also getting a 3% match on her contributions as well. So we know their goals, we know their fears, we know the assets that they have today, we know the income sources they have today and in retirement. We also know the contributions they're making to their retirement plans between now and retirement for the next few years or so. Now what we want to do is tie it all together. So as we always do, if you've watched these case study videos before, we start with a look at their cash flows, both today and into retirement. Cash flows today are pretty straightforward. We take a look at their income. Well, they have their salary. They both work for 5 more years and retire at the same time. You can see what that salary looks like if we take the combined income each year. We don't want to just look at income today though. We really also want to know, what will that income look like once they retire? You can see it's going to be a couple years of zero because John's going to wait until 70. Jane's going to wait until age 67. But you see, once they both collect their Social Security benefit, they'll have a pretty strong base of income, a very strong Social Security base. Next, we want to compare that to their expenses, not so much today, but when they retire. They want to live on $120,000 per year, which is $10,000 per month, and that is in today's dollars. So $120,000 per year allows them to do whatever they want today. We don't want to look at just today though, we want to understand, what will that number need to be in the future? When everything from groceries to clothing to utilities costs more because of inflation, what's the number that we need to look at? Well, it's this number here. This is the equivalent of $120,000 per year today, adjusted for inflation over time. On top of that, they also still will have a mortgage for a little bit going into retirement. So $10,000 per month is what they want. After the mortgage has been paid, after taxes have been paid, they want to end up with that so they can do everything they want to do, which means we want to add the mortgage separately. And the reason we don't add that all in as one single expense, so for example, the reason we don't say, okay, let's just add in this $14,000 of mortgage payment to your other expenses, is because that mortgage payment goes away at some point. You can see their housing expense. This is the principal and interest portion of their payment. They'll have 3 full years of making mortgage payments in retirement, 1 partial year after that, and then it'll be paid off. So we don't want to continue budgeting for that if that mortgage is going to be paid off. Now, by the way, if you're looking at this, a lot of people emailing me say, hey, can I have access to that software? Is there access to the software? There is. It's in our Retirement Planning Academy. You can access that in the link below. Obviously, any clients at Root Financial, we're doing this with them. But if you just want access to the software, you can find that in Retirement Planning Academy, which is in the notes below. So those are their basic living expenses. And on top of that, we need to assume or we need to plan for taxes. Now, this is an interesting one. This is before we've implemented any tax strategy. So that should really be part 2 of any type of assessment like this. But as we look at this, we can project out what might your state and federal tax liability be based on where you're pulling income from. For their plan, they were going to pull money from their joint account first, which, if you understand long-term capital gain and tax gain harvesting, if you understand how that works and make sure that you're prioritizing long-term gains and qualified dividends, a lot of their income would essentially be tax-free. Either be return of principal or be a long-term gain or qualified dividend that falls under the threshold to where that's not taxable. So tax payment very low until required distributions kick in. You can see how that tax payment bumps up pretty significantly once they both have to start taking required distributions from their portfolio. So no longer taking joint account money, but pulling money from their IRAs. Regardless though, as we go back to this, what we're really looking for is we're saying, what's the total outflow? What's the total expense John and Jane need to have coming in so they can pay taxes, so they can pay their mortgage, and have the equivalent of $10,000 per month in today's dollars to go out and use on whatever they want to use it on. So as we go back here, this is the number that really helps us tie it all together. This number right here says, what does their portfolio need to create in income? What do they need to pull from their portfolio to supplement Social Security and be able to spend what they want to spend? As you can see, it's a higher number up front that they need to pull from their portfolio because there's not Social Security coming in. There's just one of their benefits in this 3rd year here. That number drops pretty significantly once both of their Social Security payments are coming into the picture. It also drops because their mortgage is paid off after 4 years, so there's less of a demand on their portfolio to fully support that. What we do after this is we say, what is that number? What does that withdrawal represent as a withdrawal rate? Well, we check that and we said the initial withdrawal rate from the portfolio is about 4.5%. Now, 4.5%, if you're investing your portfolio the right way and following the right set of rules, probably a very sustainable withdrawal rate. The interesting thing about John and Jane's plan is it started at 4.5%, but then it dropped once Jane's Social Security benefit kicked in. The reason for that is not because they're spending less, because here's their spending, it's staying the same. Social Security is covering more of it, which means only the difference now needs to come from their portfolio. Then it drops again when John's Social Security benefit kicks in. And so what you can start to see is once both of them are collecting their full benefit, their withdrawal rate is 1.5% or so, somewhere right around there. So a very sustainable withdrawal rate, assuming they're investing their portfolio the right way. That does increase over time, and this is really the impact of required minimum distributions. They're going to be forced to start taking money from their portfolio. So I've done other videos and podcasts where I talk about how do you control for that or plan for that. But in general, a very sustainable withdrawal rate, which translates into a portfolio analysis that looks like this. John and Jane, here's your portfolio today. We're assuming a growth rate, of course, as I mentioned. There's no guarantee that growth rate's going to happen, or at least not to the extent that we're assuming it to be. You're going to save and grow your portfolio in this projection. You're going to retire right here. And even though you're now spending down your portfolio, it's still projected to grow. Because if we fast forward a couple years into retirement, if you're only spending 1.5% or so per year of your portfolio balance, and you're getting 5, 6, 7% per year growth on average in your portfolio, what that really means is there's a lot of growth that's happening that's not having to be used for withdrawals. What that really means is your portfolio is projected to continue growing over time, even as you're able to spend that money you want to spend throughout your retirement. So good news is, can you do this? Yes. What we really want to know though is not just can you do this, but how do we optimize this? Not just optimize the finances. That looks like, of course, how do you invest the right way to support this? What tax strategy can you implement to decrease your tax liability throughout retirement? Are you protected with the right insurances, the right estate plan, all of that good stuff? But also optimize from the standpoint of how do you align your money to best support what you want your life to look like? Totally separate from the finances, how can this support what's most important to John and to Jane? Let's take a look. $10,000 per month is what we're projecting. Just to look at it, what if we increase that? What if instead of $10,000 per month, we want to spend $12,000 per month? Can we do it? Well, as you can see here, there's more money in their portfolio at the end of the day. This is where they started. This is now what we're looking at. But they still have a hefty portfolio balance projected at age 90. And unless their goal is to die with a whole bunch of money that they can leave behind, we might want to see, can they accelerate some of that spending? Can they enjoy more of those experiences, do more of the cool things that they want to do? If we look at the probability of success, which is running a Monte Carlo analysis, just saying, hey, there's no guarantee of the returns that we're going to get or the sequence of the returns that we're going to get. Even as we do this, there's a Monte Carlo analysis that, it's not as high, but still very much in that zone that we think these goals are very doable. We start to show them at what point does this maybe start topping out on how much we might feel comfortable with you spending. Well, if we look at $14,000 per year or per month, just as comparison, 58% probability of success. Is it doable? Doable, it probably means there's a good chance that there's going to be some adjustment we need to take at some point. What does an adjustment look like? Well, it means maybe we don't spend $14,000 a month if the market's really dropping pretty significantly, or if inflation's increasing faster than expected. Can we make some cuts? Can we make some adjustments? This is really saying there's a 42% chance we'll have to make some adjustment in order for this plan to still be successful. But what we were able to show John and Jane is not only are you on track for your goals, you're on track to be able to enhance your quality of life without necessarily having to worry about, with some good planning, of course, are you going to run out of money at the end of the day? So what were the takeaways for John and Jane? Well, right away, could they retire on their terms on this time frame? Yeah, there's a very high probability that they're going to be able to do that. But their goal was twofold. The first was not running out of money. What this meant to them, not just having a plan that's going to barely make it, but having a plan in place that has a good amount of margin so that even if things don't go perfectly, even if there's a hiccup and when the market does or what inflation does or what unexpected expense might come up later, they've got enough margin to know that they're still going to be okay, even if life doesn't necessarily produce the optimal returns that they're looking for. So they wanted to make sure there was margin in their plan, but number two, they also didn't want to limit themselves. They didn't want to just retire and sit on the couch and stare at the wall because they didn't have enough money to do what they want to do. So they wanted to know, can we be okay, but also can we optimize this? So here's what we started working through for them. And another thing to note before we go through this is John and Jane didn't hate their jobs. They actually enjoyed their jobs. They're not in this position where they're saying, get us out of here as soon as possible. They're saying, hey, we enjoy work, but we want to really know we're on the path to being able to be financially independent and have a really high quality of life. So what does that look like if we want to know that maybe we could retire a little bit sooner than we thought we could, but also still have that margin in terms of what our spending could look like to know that we're going to be okay? So to show you what we landed on as we started working through this with John and Jane is we went back here and said, what if you're not spending 14? They thought 10,000 per month was plenty. They said, let's build in some buffer, but 10,000 per month allows us to do everything we want to do. But what if we don't work 5 more years? What if we have a game plan to work for 3 more years? So John retires at 65, Jane retires at 63. We took a look at what that might look like. And we said, yes, if you do this, it's leaving you with less money at the end of the day than you otherwise would have had. But again, the goal is not to die as wealthy as possible. It's to say, how do you get the most life out of your money? And even under this strategy, they still had a high probability of success. Put them in a position where they could spend that they wanted with more margin for error, more margin to spend on something that if that came up, they'd have to think twice. But also put them in a position to be able to do this sooner than they had initially thought, all while putting them in a position that they were reasonably well assured that they were going to be okay for the rest of their lives, even with this plan. So with this, they walked away with a 3-year plan, saying the goal is to retire from work in 3 years, to know that we can spend up to $11,000 per month and still be okay for the rest of our life. The plan didn't stop there. Once we did this, we then began to work through how do we invest your assets to best align with this, knowing we need them to start creating income 3 years from now and beyond. How do we implement a tax strategy? to take advantage of those low tax years, the first few years of retirement, to implement Roth conversions, to implement a charitable giving strategy that was important to them, to do some other tax planning work to make sure we're minimizing their lifetime tax liability. And then how do we protect it all? With the best insurance coverages, to make sure your estate plan is in order, to make sure that everything that can be done to optimize your finances is being done. So this was really step 1 to show John and Jane what's possible. Steps 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and beyond was really how do we now begin to optimize. Now, one thing we really like to optimize on that note is how do we optimize your Social Security strategy? For John, I assumed he would take at age 70. Now, sometimes 70 is the best thing that you can do. Most people say, yeah, that's going to maximize your benefit, which is true. But there's a hidden cost to doing so. And in this video right here, I walk through when collecting at age 70 might actually be a bit of a trap or might be misleading in terms of how beneficial you actually think it is. So take a look at this video if you want to understand when the best time for you to take Social Security might be based upon a number of factors, including your Social Security benefit. Once again, I'm James Knoll, founder of Root Financial, and if you're interested in seeing how we help our clients at Root Financial get the most out of life with their money, be sure to visit us at www.rootfinancialpartners.com.